Canada's always been a country that people desire to come to. I'm all for healthy immigration policies, right? I love the idea of people that are wanting to go to countries to be able to improve their lives and give their families. I believe there has to be opportunity, but it cannot be at the expense of losing what that country stands for. That does not mean you lose your heritage or the idea of the culture that you come from, but there has to be an assimilation of this is how Canadians live. This is how we work together. Here's how we treat each other. Here's how we bank. Here's the expectations for how we act in public. Here's the value on family. Here's the value on religious freedoms. Here's the value on speech. These have to be taught to people coming in from different cultures, because if they're not, they're just going to be living the culture that they came in. And guess what? That will slowly erode what Canadians stand for and believe in.
Immigration it's an evolving thing, but Canada seems to be paying the price for it. Then, especially in the G7 countries, we're doing it at such a rate that is faster than we can control, faster than we can vet, and we're doing about 500,000 a year right now, on average for I think the last 2 or 3 years, for a country that's 30 million people.
Yeah,
like that percentage is just radical. And so there's a bunch of videos that I want to show today. But one of them was there's a Canadian immigration video, and it's talking about true facts of immigration. It talks about the birth rate. It talks about if our birth rate isn't at a high place where we're replacing the people who are retiring and going into care homes or dying, we have a problem. We're going to have more people on social services than we are actually paying tax dollars to service them. And so it's a big problem for sure. So we need a healthy level of immigration. Yeah. I think the question comes from vetting processes, culture of country, policing, when you have all sorts of immigration.
Assimilation?
Yes, assimilation is huge.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with countries with different ideologies, religious beliefs, values on men and women and family units versus and so protecting culture is an extremely important thing. And you've said it a lot. I actually really like how you say it, is why do we have borders? Why do we have borders at all? Because it's a separation of ideas.
Exactly.
Ideas are naturally separated. Why do you lock your door at night? Because this is my space, my home. I will protect my family, my values. I will not just let anybody in.
Yeah. And
the only people I do let in are my family who have my values and are safe. And if I let someone in, it's because they're working on my house and they're about to leave. And I, you know what I mean? So paid work.
Totally.
This is my space. And you can kind of extrapolate that to the country in some extent, where obviously we need a healthy flow in, but the prices we're paying, I think, are too great, far too great. And
think of what you're saying with the home actually might be the perfect micro example of what the country is. Like you've got the culture of your home within your four walls, and your front door is that border control of what it is. You don't trust and just let in anyone to come in because they're going to bring, you don't know the culture that they're going to bring into your home. Yep. If you just wanted to let people in, you would lose the safety and security and the culture that you work hard to establish with your family and with your kids. The security they have to sleep at night, no one's going to come through. You don't have someone coming through and ripping down walls because they want to change things.
It's so precious. Like even, you know what's interesting too is that even if a family member stays in your home, your culture changes a little.
100%.
A family member, someone you love.
And that's someone you vetted.
You love, that you vetted.
You vetted to let in the front door. If someone knocks on your door, guess what? You're going to vet whether you're going to let them in or you're going to not let them in.
Anyone have their in-laws come and stay?
Yeah.
And mother-in-law, father-in-law. Totally. It's like, they're loved ones.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And they correct and coach your kids sometimes. And you're like, please don't correct and coach my kids. But you don't also want to say it. And it's hard. And they feel like the power authority dynamic and so on and so on and so on. Micro version of it. But I think it's a clear example of like culture differences and the protection of it. I think that one of the greatest things is housing, supply and demand. It's without you bring more people in with not enough houses, all the houses get shot up. And so some interesting stuff I've seen on some videos is there's actually a huge amount of immigrants that are just leaving now because they can't actually afford to live. So like a huge percentage went to BC. And now it's almost like, I have a video here I'll show. Actually, I got it here. Where it was talking about 40% of the immigrants in the last couple of years are interested or looking to leave BC.
Wow.
Not the country necessarily, but looking to leave BC because they can't afford to live.
It's the number one concern right across the country, affording somewhere to live. And new figures give an idea of how many Canadians and new Canadians are struggling. A study by the Angus Reid Institute finds 28% of Canadians overall are considering relocating from their current province because of housing costs. That number goes up to 39% for people who have lived here less than a decade. And 33% of newcomers living in Metro Vancouver are considering leaving. The study also found Alberta is the most popular domestic spot to relocate to at 18%, while 27% would just leave the country.
We can't have the lifestyle, we can't have the housing, we can't have the freedom, we can't have the free time, we can't have anything.
Last month, an Ipsos poll found more than 80% of Canadians cannot afford to buy a home, and now even renting is at the tipping point.
How crazy?
Well, there's several factors that contribute to the housing problem, but immigration has been one of, if not the biggest in the last 4 or 5 years. And just to give some stats on what that has looked like, Canada is, get this, the second largest country in the world, right? In terms of space and land size.
Oh, so
but we've got less people than California. But we actually are pretty densely populated along the southern border, specifically in the areas of like southern Ontario, Toronto, greater area.
Yeah, it's like 85% of our population is below the 30.
So there is a density that is there when you think of lots of land. But in 2023 alone, 2.3 million foreigners. So it's broken down this way. Just over 1 million were foreign students, which we'll get to in just a moment on what that's done for the housing. 760,000 and change were migrant workers that have come in, and 470,000 were landed immigrants, meaning they are here now permanently. But that's a population influx of 2 million. If you think of how big Canada is, Canada is just shy of 40 million or right around there. That's a 5% increase in 1 year in population. In 1 year of population. You can back up to, 500,000. 2024, it's estimated to be, again, right around 500,000, like you said. 2025, 500,000 of new permanent residents. So that's growing your country pretty quick. Now, if your infrastructure, now we can talk about maybe the issues our country's had in the last 9 or 10 years with infrastructure problems, right? Higher taxes, but are we getting better services for our money? We have a housing shortage. I know last year is predicted that by 2026, we're going to be about, I think it's 1.6 million houses short to basically handle the population. So the point you're making with that is immigration is directly tied to the rise, because essentially what we're doing is we're significantly increasing the demand for housing while we have a limited supply.
Yeah.
Like our supply is not growing like that.
Yeah.
So,
well, like, and we, to speak to our situation specifically, Tamara and I sold our home in 2021. When was it? 2021? I think it's 2021.
COVID?
Yeah, it was right in the middle of that. Or at the end of it, I guess, the back end, close to. And so we've been pretty much house shopping ever since. But the housing market literally just shot through the roof. And the renting market shot through the roof. And we feel kind of imprisoned going, we made a little bit of money on our home. Nothing insane. But we're going, we can't re-enter. We're losing everything we've gained and more and paying higher.
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure out where to re-enter right now, and we can't. The rent we're paying is crazy expensive. It's constantly climbing, and we don't know what to do. Like, we're trying to figure out what to do. So we're just renting, and I didn't think I'd pay rent this high at all.
Yeah.
Like, I really didn't think we would.
Well, renting has almost become the new American dream.
We're paying $1,000 more on our rent than we did our mortgage before.
Did I?
Yeah.
Well, Dee and I, we built our house in 2019, just before COVID. We moved in. I think we built it for just under $600,000, right? Now, I think it's jumped up to just over $1 million, which is 4 years. Which people say, oh, it's amazing. You got equity in there. It's like, well, no. If now I want to move into just a comparable house, you look at what is that? That's over 50% increase. Yeah. Plus everything the interest rates that are on it.
Yeah. Everything else.
Plus the increase in taxes. Yeah. It's like, no, just to be able to go into the same lifestyle that my family is used to, I am now paying significantly more than what it is, right? And so people think, oh, it's great. It's not, because you're forced to get into another home and you're losing what you already built up. So it's this kind of this dichotomy of, cool, you got equity, but no, you don't, because you got to use it just to get in similar things.
We have a realtor friend here in Winnipeg, and we're in Winnipeg right now. That's why we're in a different studio. But we have a realtor friend in Winnipeg. I won't say her name, but she was telling me about multiple students who have come in to buy in an area called Sage Creek here. Beautiful new area, great homes, like it's gorgeous. They're developing it in such an incredible way over here. And the students would come in and pay cash for almost $1 million home. And she said multiple sales of homes. They'd come do one walkthrough and go, okay, sounds good. What's the list price? Okay. And they'd offer $20,000 above. We'll take it right now. Signed, sealed, delivered, done, and apparently in cash. They would just, no loan, nothing. It was
foreign
done.
students, you're saying?
Foreign, all foreign. And so they'd come stay at the University of Manitoba. And so obviously I'm assuming it's generational wealth. It's from their mom or dad or somebody that's going, yep. And so they're coming in. And so the student visa is giving them a window, allowing them to make a purchase of a home here. And however, wherever that money is coming from, is taking homes away from current residents here. And it's a big problem. It's a really big problem, driving up the prices everywhere else. And it's just consistently happening. And that's just one story of one friend of mine who knows multiple times that's happened on her watch.
There's a lot of not just stories, but facts of what you touched on. Can we get that to the moment? Let's make the case for why immigration is good. First off, because Canada's always been a country that people desire to come to. We've always had immigration policies. They have just been massively ramped up in the last number of years. Post-COVID is definitely a big factor, right? In terms of how, because immigration can also be seen as kind of like an upfront stimulus into the economy. Because when you try to bring in people, especially if they're skilled workers, they're bringing their money, their net worth with them, not assets, but they usually liquidate their assets to come here. So you kind of have that little plug into it. But generally countries, especially some of the G7 countries or the more advanced economies, immigration is there for several reasons. You bring in skilled workers from other countries to help up your skilled workforce, right? Especially and let's shelf this and get to this in a second too. Canada is in a population decline in terms of birth rate. We're not even doing enough to support our own culture and our own Canadian identity in terms of families rebirthing and adding to the population. So countries who do that, and Europe has been doing that for, the last 15 years, they've been below the actual replacement number. You see immigration happen there. So immigration is a good way for advanced economies to maintain the productivity and your economy being able to be effective, right? That's one reason. As skilled workers, we said, helping your population grow. We just hit two of them there because of the birth rate as well. But also the stimulus in terms of helping economies kind of go forward and grow. And also if you have an aging population, like
that's the idea.
Right. That's the idea.
The idea of it is that, but the thing that I question is, in a country with this size, with the government size we're bringing in 500,000 people every 12 months. I don't have any faith in the system to vet 50,000 a month. Vetting. How do you vet that?
That's a good point.
How do you question that? Do they have social media pages, every single one of them? Are they coming alone? Are every one of them contributing? No. If you come, you're going to bring your family, and so there's 3 or 4 others with you. You might be the only working one in the family. I rarely doubt that there's 2 working coming in, especially if they have kids. So yes, bringing in a skill set, but also bringing in a burden on the system with the other 3 or 4 at the same time, not compensating for what it's bringing in. Like, those are questions I ask. And then the vetting is the giant question. Vetting, how do you even do that? We work in a company, and hiring an employee is hard enough to vet on its own. You look at their socials, but they also know that they're applying for a job. They'll clean things up, delete certain posts, and look real sharp. And that's the most I got. Then you can ask them questions, and they'll give you your resume. And so a government has a passport, a travel history, and then I guess they'll do a criminal record check, which, do our criminal records even coexist with other countries? I don't even know. So I have no faith in what the so-called vetting process is at all. I don't trust that whatsoever.
Well, if that was your gut, that's pretty good gut. Because I wrote down a stat. This for every skilled immigrant that we bring in, they usually bring in 4 unskilled
There
workers.
you go.
Family,
Yeah.
right? And the reason why it's such a bigger ratio, well, India is the biggest contributor to Canada's immigration.
Yeah.
Right? And typically they have larger families. Family is a big value for them to be able to have. And that also is a problem that's not, in terms of if you're bringing the people in to be able to help your economy, that's not overall.
Yeah, because obviously well down the road, once they start getting jobs and tax paying down the road, 15, 16 years later, for sure, if that's working, assume they can afford to live and stay.
Yeah.
For sure.
So if advanced economies use immigration for a while, I wrote down a couple of questions about Canada we should try to answer. Why are we so sensitive to immigration in terms of it affecting our country in a negative sense, right? Being an advanced economy, what's it doing to our country? Like we'll touch on culture, like you said, let's touch on the the student visas. We'll look at the idea of assimilation. And also, is it a drain on our current resources? Because we are producing less on a per capita basis than we were before immigration. So that means you have less to go around amongst more people, right?
Yeah.
And then there's also an economist that I read that made an argument saying Canada should slow down its immigration, but it can't necessarily afford to slow down its immigration due to our declining output.
We're really in a weird spot for sure. And there's a video from Bill Maher, and it's funny that we have to go to Bill Maher lately, but he seems
I've
to
been
be
liking Bill Maher a lot more lately.
Logical thoughts.
Just because it seems to be logical.
It's just such a great video. I'll show you this. And he's got some great thoughts about Canada, US, and lessons learned.
Last year, Canada added 1.3 million people, which is a lot in 1 year, the equivalent of the US adding 11 million migrants in 1 year. And now they're experiencing a housing crisis even worse than ours. And we're sleeping in tents. The median price of a home here is $346,000. In Canada, converted to US dollars, it's $487,000. If Barbie moved to Winnipeg, she wouldn't be able to afford her dream house, and Ken would be working at Tim Hortons. And because of mortgage debt, Canada has the highest debt to GDP ratio of any G7 nation. I don't know what that means, but it sounds bad. So does their vaunted healthcare system, which ranks dead last among high-income countries in access to primary health care and ability to see a doctor in a day or two. And it's not for lack of spending. Of the 30 countries with universal coverage, Canada spends over 13% of its economy on it, which is a lot of money for free health care. Look, I'm not saying Canada still isn't a great country. It is, but those aren't paradise numbers. I'm not saying any of this because I enjoy it. I don't, because I've always enjoyed you. But I need to cite you as a cautionary tale to help my country. And the moral of that tale is, yes, you can move too far left. And when you do, you wind up pushing the people in the middle to the right.
Yeah, that's crazy. So again, what Citizen and this show is all about is bad ideas equals bad results. We had a healthy immigration policy and system for years and years and years, and that has changed, right? With our current government, they've changed their policies, and they may be trying it to stimulate an economy. They may be trying it. In fact, I do want to quote Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, because you remember in 2015, I think it was 2015 or 2016, he used the term that Canada is a post-national country. So this idea of nationalism, being proud of your nation and your culture and who you are and what you represent. There's this ideology that is stemmed through our government that Trudeau ran on, or at least maybe not ran on, but he said after he was elected to office that Canada is a post.
Why do you think he says?
Well, because I think
to gain it from that.
I think it comes from just his ideology about this idea of world unity, of this idea of equity, this idea of why do we really need to have borders of this overarching, I'm not going to use the term, I'm not implying one world government type of thing. What I'm saying is it's just this we're all together, we're all in it, whatever. Some people are going to comment and say absolutely is that. But what I can quote him saying is post-national country, which to me exactly means Canadian is not priority. We can even look at the amount of money that we're sending outwards and not focusing inwards. We can look at the idea of the tolerance that we've had for people tearing down Canadian icons like statues of John A. Macdonald or things that have made Canada what it is. We already are an interesting country because we don't have a giant history like places like in Italy or Portugal or even the United States and coming from British colonies and fighting for their, like, we have an interesting culture, but it's not long lasting, right? We got parts of us that were French colonies, parts of us that broke off from what was happening in, like, you look at what was Upper and Lower Canada in like 1812 when we were fighting the U.S. And Canada became a country in, what was it, 1876, right?
Yeah.
Was it 1876?
Is that when we burnt the White House
1867.
down? Right?
Yeah, we did. We burnt down the White House, Americans, in 1812.
It's weird that we're like proud of that, but it's just like, we feel like the little,
we should burn down that.
The little brother want to fight against the older brother.
Yeah,
that's what it feels like.
Rhetoric of violence. But,
I have no idea about what violence I'm talking about right now.
Canada did maybe win that one.
I should not even.
It's actually cool if you go to New Brunswick, or if you go to like St. John, New Brunswick, which is like you have like half a kilometer, half a mile across from Maine, right there on the strait. You can see old blockhouses that were built with cannons that were there to protect during the war that was happening because they were trying to get over the border at that point. It's pretty cool. Anyways, this idea of post-nationalism, you look at our most recent Canadian passport change.
What's that?
We've had. Our passports, like a couple of years ago, we changed a lot of the icon and the imagery within the passport.
I didn't know that.
Completely. A lot of the things that have Canadian meaning and identity were taken out. 100%. You look at these things and they're all little things that go on, but for most Canadians, it's right over our heads. But when you add that up, is that you are moving an inch at a time, and before you know it, you look back, it's like, how far did we move? Well, you move because you've allowed it. It's like Jordan Peterson has this great clip from 2016 on Joe Rogan, where Joe Rogan makes a comment about, but we would never go get that far. Jordan Peterson snaps back and he says, people who are sophisticated into moving you to where they want you to move, they're going to move up. I'm not sure if the cameras will capture me. They're going to move up right into your space.
Yeah, slowly without you knowing.
And I'm in your space.
Quite uncomfortable.
And then, it's super uncomfortable. And then you're going to be like, get back. And then so I'll back off. But you'll tolerate before I know it. You move back an inch. And now I encroach again when you kind of forget about it. And you move back another inch. And then if you look at it, you may not like it, but you're tolerating it.
It'll become a new normal.
Allowing it.
Because exactly, that whole reference right there is like, it gets uncomfortable here, so I might push you back to about here, but you've gained all that.
Yeah. And then next time, instead of me moving, you might just take that and go back. Like, actually have a conversation with a stranger in the street. If you stand too close, we should all play this game. Stand too close, you can try to direct them and move them. I used to do this in the halls at church as a kid with with people. You stand too close and you'd see them take a step back.
Naturally,
and you'd have a goal to get them somewhere. Anyways, the idea with our culture is that when you're giving up these little pieces by pieces by pieces, before you know it, over 20 years, it's like you've given up your identity.
Well, and even one of the things that I noticed is almost seems like a bragging point on social media is they're self-proclaiming themselves as dinks. And that sounds like an insult, but what it means is dual income, no kids.
Yeah.
D-I-N-K. Yeah. Dual income, no kids. And they're self-proclaiming going, we're dinks. We get to do what we want and no one gets to dictate it. We get to go on vacations and we have enough money.
Yeah.
That's only a brag in an economy in a country where you can't go on vacation, can't take your kids away, can't pay for food. That's why that's a thing, is because they're going, we can survive now. We're dual income with no kids. And that's the culture, not the culture. That's the environment, the ecosystem we've created. That's a brag. That's a flex. I can go away on weekends and pay for myself. It's like,
you know what? If you've chosen
sad
to be a dink,
like
if you've chosen to be a dink, you are an actual dink. You are deceived, and you think that life is better that way, and you are missing out on the greatest joy that you can have in family. I would even say you're selfish because it's all about you.
Yeah.
And you also are contributing to the idea of losing the identity of what we believe in as Canadians.
I will advocate for the other side slightly, because if people aren't good humans and they don't want kids, I don't want them to have kids. Like that. So that's my that's my devil's advocate side.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, because I'm going, please don't raise a kid.
If you're an idiot, don't duplicate yourself.
Please, But I genuinely am concerned about some people who just have kids and aren't intentional about it. But kids are, like you said, the greatest thing that can ever happen. You couldn't give me a home that will give me the level of happiness and joy and purpose that a kid, one of my kids gives me. You can't give me a yacht or a trip around the planet and a Monaco and Formula One and racing and cars and jets. Doesn't touch it. It just doesn't touch it. It's a sense of purpose and value so high that nothing compares to it. But again, if someone isn't, hey, please don't have kids for sure. But if you're on the edge and going, I don't know, you don't know your life's greatest purpose yet.
Exactly.
You have not discovered it, and it's there.
Exactly.
Guarantee it. Oh,
and you don't know until you actually know.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. And I'm a more recent father and family in the last 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Forever. I would take a life of living paycheck to paycheck, watching every cent that goes in and out with kids, and the joy that having a wonderful wife and the wonderful kids have and bring, than having excess money and not having that. Because I've seen both sides.
Yeah.
I would take that. And
I probably wouldn't have said that though before kids.
For sure.
I would have been like, In fact, I had a friend of mine sit me down once and go, what are you waiting for to have kids?
You don't think so? Well, you were raised in the context of
I don't think I would have said that with
family
that
and family values, though.
For sure. I knew I wanted kids, but I'm serious. I was scared to have kids because I was going, what does this mean for my life? Even though I knew in my core I wanted kids.
Yeah.
But I was scared to pull the trigger. Even though we had kids pretty young, I was still scared to pull the trigger. And I didn't let my emotions control me.
Yeah.
But I did have a friend sit down and go, what are you waiting for? And I told him, I said, I got to save up money. I can't afford to live right now. And he goes, so what amount? And I was like, how much? Tell me, what dollar amount do you hit that finally goes, okay, I'm ready. I was like, I don't know. He goes, you will never know. You'll never be ready. You just have to dive in and you'll sort it out as you go. Yeah. And that was a very eye-opening moment for me. And thank God we did. Because now on the other side of it, I'm going, if I could talk to myself as younger, I'd go have kids sooner. Figure it out. You always will figure it out. But
the families that you and I married into, and there's 5 kids, but now with the grandkids, we're with a couple births happening this year. There's going to be 11 grandkids, all under 10.
Yeah.
Like our individual families are the greatest joy, and then getting together as families is the next greatest joy. Like seeing all the cousins, like just family is such a beautiful thing. And I was so selfish.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was. But if you don't know what true selflessness is until you have kids.
Yeah.
You literally have to, and this is scriptural, die to self every day when you have kids. I just want to read, I thought we'll go this way, but 1 John 3:16 tells us that by this we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. And I don't think I understood what that meant until you have a kid where you, and your wife as well, you have that, but to truly lay down your life for someone else. Anyways, my point is, and why we went that route is, I think family and our birth rate in Canada, we know it's low. We're not even replicating ourselves to sustain our own culture at our current birth rate, right?
Yeah.
What was the stat about?
1.33. I'll pull it up here.
That's Canada's current birth rate.
Was
replication rate. What's it called?
So I was trying to find sources, and so I searched it up right here, and it says as of 2022, Canada's birth rate is at an all-time low of 1.33 children per woman, which is significantly below the replacement level of approximately 2.1 children per woman. This downward trend has been ongoing since 2009, and it was further accelerated by COVID-19. Crazy.
So I remember seeing an economist video maybe a couple of years ago regarding Europe, thinking Europe is screwed because of this thing you're talking about, the birth rate.
Yeah.
And I saw a different number. So the number I saw is 1.6. You're quoting 2. 2 makes sense because it considers 2 people typically to make a baby, unless you do in vitro or things like that. But this video is saying the average family needs to have 1.6 children in order to sustain. Maybe that's the difference. Sustain the population. But Europe's average rate was like 1.1, 1.2, drastically below. Meanwhile, you have got other countries that are immigrating to these countries that have got birth rates of 5, 6, 7, right? So just adding the numbers and doing the math is that you are going to have a culture replacement in a matter of 50 years.
Yeah.
So Canada is in that boat right now at the current pace that we are going, is that we're not even replacing and ourselves. And we're now relying on immigration just to be able to remain productive. Now, I'm all for healthy immigration policies, right? I love the idea of people that are wanting to go to countries to be able to improve their lives and give their families. I believe there has to be opportunity, but it cannot be at the expense of losing what that country stands for. This is why you're talking about the vetting process earlier. This is why assimilation, I think, is a very important. Now, that does not mean you lose your heritage or the idea of the culture that you come from. But there has to be an assimilation of this is how Canadians live. This is how we work together. Here's how we treat each other. Here's how we bank. Here's the expectations for how we act in public. Here's the value on family. Here's the value on religious freedoms. Here's the value on speech. Like these have to be taught to people coming in from different cultures. Because if they're not taught it, they're just going to be living the culture that they came in. And guess what? That will slowly erode what Canadians stand for and believe in.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why the whole point of the home value system is that the analogy we gave at the beginning about my home, my walls, my doors, who do I let in, who do I not, has to be the question that's constantly asked. I didn't even realize actually, because when you brought up the point of people let into the country, and you said 2.3 million, I was like, the number that you talk about is always 500,000. I didn't consider all the other avenues. I didn't even realize that.
Students.
They don't talk about that.
No.
That's not what they touch on at all.
Because you're right, 500,000, but that's landed immigrants.
Yes.
Meaning people who are here permanently.
But look, I just looked this up on ChatGPT. As of 2024, Canada has a total immigrant population of approximately 8.4 million, accounting for 23% of overall population.
Oh, I see.
Additionally, there are 2.8 million non-permanent residents in the country.
Yes, okay, so let's clarify. So Aussie's right, but a total of 2.3 million foreigners were in Canada last year, including 1 million plus foreign students, 766,000 migrant workers, and just shy of 500,000 landed immigrants. So that means that they were in Canada in that current 1 year period.
So I think about this,
wasn't brought in. That's the important distinction.
Think about this: 8.4 million. So you have almost 25%.
Yeah,
1 out of 4 is not your culture, not your people. That's a huge
if they're not assimilated properly and buying into the ideas, right?
But I wouldn't expect them to be, especially right off the bat.
Okay, so there's a stat that came out from the Department of Immigration in Canada, and it released a poll about a month ago, and the results are half of Canadians, so 51%, agree immigrants need to do more to integrate into Canadian society.
So there's a poll taken of Canadian residents.
Yeah, of Canadians. So I would assume that would be citizens, potentially permanent PRs as well.
Yeah.
Just under half of Canadians, so 46%, agree Canadians should focus on helping unemployed Canadians rather than looking for skilled immigrants to fill labor shortages. We need to touch on skilled laborers that are Canadian that are leaving to go to the US and other countries because of the issues we have. So we're relying on skilled immigrants to be able to fill those positions that Canadians are leaving. And then it continues on and says, so 46% should agree on we should put more focus on helping Canadians become skilled rather than bringing in immigrants.
Absolutely.
And about 1/4, so 27% of Canadians agree immigration is causing Canada to change in ways they don't like. Now I always question stats and things like this, but this was about 3,000 people with 14 different focus groups nationwide, so all sections of Canada. Obviously, 3,000 is a tiny number in terms of Canadian society, but it's a decent size for a poll.
Yeah,
take it what you want with a grain of salt.
For sure.
The sentiment, I think, is accurate.
I think there's a huge gap in our education system to make the current Canadian residents who are in schools take the leap into high-skilled jobs that add value to the country. I was reflecting on my relationships, on who I know in their 18, 20s, 25. There's not many I know. In fact, even in my own graduation class, I remember the majority of everyone in my class going, I don't know what I'm going to do. Post-secondary, hugely low percentage going into post-secondary, uncertain, don't know. Most just kind of went into the market, and that was about it. Some of them took extracurricular. What's that university course at the University of Manitoba, where it's just like a, I don't know, course to try to get you in. I don't even know what it's called, but it just covers a bunch of basics. But there was no intention. It just seems like there was such a gap for that, and that's a huge problem because we have a lot of workers here. Yeah. Like even when I think about some of our family members that we saw last night at the barbecue, I'm going, there's some incredible men there and women that are talented. Have they bridged the gap to get into a place of, it's just not talked about here. It's not communicated. It's not a part of our language or education. I remember being frustrated because there was a couple key students in my class that were straight A's. And then at graduation, they got a bunch of scholarships. And I went, how did they even get those? Like, I didn't even know how they got them. I'm going, well, I guess it's just, maybe they hunt you down. I found out after graduating that you go talk to the guidance counselor ahead of time and you apply for them ahead of time and you hit the certain marks in your grades ahead of time. I had no clue. Did you? I didn't know that. Like, I didn't know that in grade 10, 11, 9. Had I had a goal or a target given to me saying, hey, you can, if you get into the top percentage of this, you can get into this school and they'll cover your whole way through. If I had a target, I would have been like, let's go.
Yeah.
I could have hit that target. I had no care for it. I just think that's a symptom of a school education program. It seems like this is a Band-Aid fix for a poor system.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. And what you touched on, so we talked about skilled workers and the focus on Canadians being empowered, so to speak. And there's a certain degree of we want autonomy in terms of forging your own way, but we want to have the proper economics in our country to support that. And I want to read a couple of things that this is from a different economist, I forget his name. But right now, the USA is far more productive than Canada. This is important because they're our neighbor to the south, and literally in some cities across Canada, they're just across the river.
Yep.
So it's not like it's far, right?
Yep.
They're more efficient. Get this. These are the current stats of US in descriptive terms compared to Canada. They're more efficient in terms of how they work and what they produce. There's higher wages, especially on the middle to top end scales.
Low end, the high.
There's better business opportunities, lower taxes. If you haven't watched our episode on taxes and talking about with Martin Peltier and that whole thing, you have to watch that one because it talks about how taxes, we believe, is absolutely killing Canadians and our ability. In fact, you and I read a couple days ago, the average Canadian family, this came out from the Department of Canada.
Yeah.
Average Canadian family has a household income, so typically two people, right, of $107,000 Canadian. The average household pays in taxes, and I don't know all the taxes they're including, but for sure it's income tax and all these others, is $47,000 and change. So the average Canadian family is paying more in taxes than we are in housing, in clothing.
Yeah, because that's food. It was 43% of their total income.
Yeah, and food combined. So more is going to taxes than our basic living needs. Shelter, food, and clothing. That's the country we have. So take that into consideration of the USA and Canada, is that they got more productivity than us. They have higher wages. They're more efficient. There's better business opportunities, especially in medical and in technology. Lower taxes. And they're in cities that in some cases are just across the river. And so because of that, and now after the immigration of us bringing in skilled workers, while we're not become more productive, meaning we're not creating more jobs. Remember, we've touched on the Canadian government has been the highest growth employment in our country, right? Is that we are actually having our own skilled workers and laborers leaving Canada to go into the States to work, to have a better life. And we're replacing them with immigration skilled. And that's causing a major issue. And I'm all for a certain degree of immigration, but not at the expense of what Canada stands for, what Canada's culture is, and what Canadian citizens should be able to meet their needs in our own country. And right now we're failing at that.
So I wish you could figure this out quickly because it's a big question, but I wish you could put policies of US, Canada side by side because I just wrote here, okay, so how do we fix this? If you and I elected into office right now, what do you do?
I'm slashing 70% of our.
I think you start with taxes.
Yes, for sure.
I think that's why Pierre is running on getting rid of a lot of the Crown Corps, trying to, and like even he has a huge thing about CBC and talking about the money we throw there. But then also he talks about how he's going to turn a lot of their buildings into housing. Like so, it's an interesting tactic. But giving more houses, pulling away Crown Corps, lowering taxes, essentially propping up the individual middle class, general income. But I don't know. Like,
let's do an episode on that. You and I are co-prime ministers. What are we doing? Steps 1 through 10. And there's a lot of great think tanks that are out there that have put together action plans.
Yeah.
for I know specific for cities and provinces.
I'd love
maybe
to look
there's
at
been
that
for countries. But yeah, you're right. Really, you're looking at what's the fat that we can trim.
What do
is
you do?
The Pareto principle, 80-20. What is getting us results and what's not getting us results? There's no doubt there's insane bureaucracy. We're paying more taxes to support the bureaucracy, and we are not getting better services.
Yeah.
Right? There's so much wasted. It's just, anyways, that's a whole nother.
Because another famous Instagram photo going around right now is equalization payments.
Yeah.
The West versus the East.
Yeah.
And like billions upon billions of dollars from the West Coast being transferred to the
East
Manitoba,
Coast.
Ontario, to the whole East
And
Coast.
Quebec's the biggest recipient. Ontario's
the largest.
I believe, recipient. Manitoba.
And so, which means they're not producing enough goods and services, and the West is producing more than enough to give it away. And even among restrictions on oil production and oil sands and pipelines being killed and so on and so on and so on, they're still doing that. So there's just so much to it.
It's in depth, but also at the same time, it can be basic.
Yeah, and even like in Alberta, we don't have a provincial tax. There's no PSD there.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
And Alberta's a case study on how we suffered from bad government for 4 years under NDP and Rachel Notley. And suffered meaning you just look at all the stats and how we turned, and you look at the Conservative government that came in and I think put pretty basic principles in, and how we've turned around in a short time.
Yeah,
it is complicated in depth and a lot of work, but at the same time, I do think it's relatively simple in terms of the strategy going into it. To close, let's talk on the idea of international foreign students in Canada and the workarounds and the loopholes that are there, which affects our economy in terms of the potential immigration.
And I touched on that slightly. Yeah. Because the friend that I said was a realtor who has students coming in. So when a student comes in, they're allowed to get a place to live, to be a resident while they're here for a visa, but there's allowances to purchase land. And so they're purchasing land away from residents who are currently residents, not visas, not temporary visas that are supposed to be a temporary, so that foreign investment is in property is restricted to a certain extent, making it very difficult for someone from China to buy a house here. It still happens. I don't know what the restrictions are, but the visa is a full door open from what I understand. From a few videos and people and experts I've seen on Economists, they're saying it's a door wide open, buy the property, and that's what my friend was saying. A few students come in and pay cash for almost $1 million house to be a student. When they're done their student visa, are they allowed to hang on to that property?
Yeah.
I would assume so.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy.
Globe and Mail wrote a bit ago, and the title of their article was Immigration Minister is urged to crack down on international student no-shows at colleges. Because
not even showing up.
Because get this, because there are very generous laws on what international students can do on their visas. For example, when they're here on a student visa, they can work full time when they're on a break. And I'm using quotations, I'll explain in a second. They can buy housing, which skirts around the laws and the bans on foreign ownership and buying that we've implemented because there has been this propping up of our real estate, especially in Vancouver area and Toronto and etc. So if you're here on a student visa, there's nothing stopping you from your rich mom and dad giving you $10 million Canadian. Go buy 5 properties while you're at that university and you can live in them, and others you can sit empty. So they get around those, which obviously is what it's doing to our market. At the same time, you can also bring partners in with you, like partners or spouses or whatever into. So there are those loop arounds. And when I meant schools is because there are these literal fake colleges with fake teachers that are being made in Canada that students are going to.
Are you serious?
And they're getting granted student visas. This goes back to the argument of the vetting process. Is these ideas that there's colleges, they do their thing, but they don't actually conduct classes to learn or they fake it or they cram it into like 2 days.
We need to do an investigative
100%
test on that. Right?
Wow. And that allows student visas to be issued to foreign people to come in, and yet then they end up buying and getting involved with the economy, which has its pros and cons, probably more cons than pros, definitely more cons than pros. Wow. But that's something that also, I don't have all the information to show the in-depth analysis, but that is an accurate thing. And the Globe and Mail did report on that, saying there has to be a crackdown. That's why it says immigration minister urged to crack down on international student no-shows at colleges, because it's like the Wild West.
That is so crazy. I've never actually heard that once ever. That's the first time I've ever heard of that. That makes me want to dig in so deep to figure out what the heck's going on. Because that's obviously it's being abused and used to buy property and so on.
Yeah.
The question I have is, because it's not clear in my head, why do they want to buy property here if they're doing it?
I don't know.
Like that's
it's a way to park money.
Because I've seen, or maybe
avoid taxes maybe in their countries.
Because I've seen it happening. I see the United States talk all about it. Because there's apparently a huge amount of Chinese land being bought near, I don't know if this is true, near military bases. And there's huge concern abroad about it, like saying, why are we allowing this to happen? This is a country that has very different interests than we do, Why are we letting them buy space near military bases? Like, what are we doing? And I mean a lot. So I'd love to dig into that.
I think there's definitely foreign interference that happens from country to country. Like there are these long-term strategies on how to get into countries, intelligence control, mess with different things.
Yeah.
I think we as individuals, we give people the benefit of the doubt thinking, oh, they're nice. Why would they do that? And we often judge people by what we would do.
Yeah.
And so we don't put on those, well, they wouldn't do that. And we also think, way too short term.
Yeah.
In the here and now. Like most people are just thinking day to day. Or I think you've got different places that, like the Chinese government, like other governments, where they're literally generational thinking, what is long-term strategies in terms of,
and it goes
I'm not saying all of them are, but I definitely think there's a component.
Well, it goes back to borders and ideas. That's why.
Yeah.
All through time, conquering and fighting and war it's just a war of ideas, essentially. When you bring it down to food for thought, what it is, it's a war of ideas. And that doesn't magically go away because we're politically correct in 2024.
Totally.
Like it's not gone at all. So, yeah.
Well,
it's crazy.
Want to know what you guys think? Have you noticed, first off, where do you live in Canada? Have you noticed, has it affected your area, your communities in terms of the increased immigration? Has it been good? Has it been bad? We've definitely noticed it in different areas as well. I think if you look at the numbers and stats, they're starting to show. Want to be clear, this is not an anti-immigration episode.
Well, yeah, that's worth saying because
it's not.
Yeah.
We're pro and for good immigration. I love being, some of my best friends that I know are immigrants to this country.
For sure.
Right? And it's nothing to do with that. But we have to be logical and you have to be able to say, is this working for our country? Because we are firm believers in preserving what Canada means and providing opportunity for our future generations. And I think
that's the greatest concern.
Right?
Yep. That's the greatest concern is what country are we leaving? What country are we building?
Yeah.
What are they going to be stepping into? What policies? Yeah. All of that has to be questioned all the time so that we know what's to come because that's why. So
cool. Hey, follow us on all the socials, wherever they're at, YouTube, subscribe. Love hearing what you guys have to think. If you totally think we're out to lunch, let us know. If you agree, please let us know as well. Appreciate all your support. Anything else we should say?
Nope. That's it.